Good and gracious God, may the words that I speak, may the thoughts and insights of our hearts and minds be acceptable to you, you who are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Isaiah, the prophet, the one whose words I just read for you a moment ago, has a serious dilemma, a big problem. He has been called by God to declare the good news to Israel. He has been called by God to tell Israel, I still have a plan for you. I still have a dream for you. You are going to return to your homeland. You are going to continue to be my people. I have chosen you, and I have not forgotten you. So you may be saying to me, so how is that a problem? That he's declaring such good news to the people of Israel? Well, it's a problem because the people of Israel in Babylon, to whom he is declaring this good news, will have none of it. They don't buy it for a moment. It's as if they look at Isaiah and say, hey, what have you been smoking? Your words do not match up with reality. We have been in Babylon now for almost 70 years. And we see no indication whatsoever that we are going to be released from our bondage, that we are going to be treated fairly and equally, much less that we are going to be allowed to return to our homeland. We are under the thumb of the most mighty nation in the world, and there is no indication whatsoever that that's going to change. Sorry, Isaiah, we just don't buy it. And that's why in verse 4, Isaiah responds to God and says, it seems as if all my efforts have been useless. I have used all of my strength for no purpose and for nothing. I have given my whole life, Isaiah is saying, to proclaim this message, and it is going nowhere. There is no change. There is no future. And frankly, Isaiah is beginning to wonder whether he really heard God right after all. Whether the message he has been proclaiming, whether the dream for Israel that he has been sharing has any reality behind it. And to that doubt, God responds by saying, I'll do you one better, Isaiah. Not only am I going to free my people Israel from their oppression, not only am I going to give them the opportunity to return to their homeland, but I'm going to do one better. I am going to make them a light to the Gentiles. I am going to make them a beacon for not just Israel, but for all the nations. All the nations will come to you and bow down because of the truths that you have declared. Isaiah, God is saying, you have a message to declare. You have a truth to proclaim that I have given you. It's your job to proclaim it. And it's my job to bring it to fruition, to make it happen. Isaiah had a dream. And God said, don't let go of the dream. Keep proclaiming it. Keep preaching it. Believe that I can make it happen. there was another prophet of God who had a dream. In many ways, a very similar dream of being free, of being released from oppression, of living abundantly. And that man's name, of course, was Martin Luther King Jr. King had a dream, and like Isaiah, he believed that it was not just his dream, but that God had given it to him. In fact, that God had called him to declare that message, to proclaim that dream. And like Isaiah, there were a lot of times when King must have felt as if it was all for nothing. That he was banging his head against a wall, that he was getting nowhere. As Isaiah said, that all my efforts are useless, that I've used my strength, I've given my entire life for nothing and to no real purpose. But King had the wisdom to know that just because people were not responding did not mean that the dream was not real or that he should not continue to proclaim it. And so he unrelentingly shared that dream in powerful and poetic language across our country. Probably the most famous articulation of that dream came in Washington, D.C. on the National Mall in 1963. I'd like to read you just a few sentences from that statement, from that speech. King says, "I say to you today, my friends, that even though we face great difficulties today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that on the red hills of Georgia, someday the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slaveholders will be able to sit down together in brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering in the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream." And King continued to proclaim the dream. And not just to proclaim it, but to work it, to live it, to embody it, and to challenge everyone he encountered to become a part of making the dream a reality. That didn't always go easily, and it didn't always go well. 5 years later, he found himself in Memphis, Tennessee, supporting the sanitation workers' strike. And he gave a dream speech that was eerily reminiscent in some ways of the speech he had given in Washington, D.C., but also a dream speech that gave a foretelling of the future. Here's what he said on that night, April 3rd, 1968. King said, "Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't really matter to me now because I've been to the mountaintop. and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And so, I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. King clearly understood what the prophet Isaiah had a hard time grasping. That it was his job to continue to preach the dream, to hold up the vision, and it was God's job to bring it to fruition. King made that speech on April 3rd, 1968. And the next day, he was assassinated. You and I are as much prophets as Isaiah or as Martin Luther King Jr. unless we opt out, unless we choose not to be. As surely as King was called to proclaim equality and freedom and fairness for all men and women, for all peoples, so too we are called to make that same proclamation, to stand up for those same principles, and to live those out as best we are able in our own lives. Sometimes it feels as if we are no closer to realizing that dream than when King made those speeches back in the 60s. I read a study just a few weeks ago that documented the fact that the schools, the public schools in America, in the United States, are just as segregated today as they were before 1954 when the Supreme Court ruled in Brown versus the Board of Education that those schools must be integrated. 60 years later, and at least on that front, we've made no progress. The history of our civilization seems to be that we take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And certainly today it feels as if we've taken at least 2 steps back. And it can be tempting to throw in the towel and to say, I guess that wasn't God's intention. I guess that isn't the dream. I guess we packed it. But we, like King, are called to continue to live the dream, to embody it, to make it a part of our DNA and a part of our lives, even when it doesn't seem that we're getting anywhere. It doesn't mean that God has given up. It simply means in God's way, in God's time. And to quote King one more time, he said to us, "The arc of moral history is long, but it bends toward justice." The arc of moral history is long, but it bends toward justice. May it be so. And may it be so because we do our best to help make it so. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.